Welcome to Mission to Inspire, where we share life experiences in our careers, personal lives, society, culture, religion, finance, family, and much more. Meet your host, Shola Ajibade, as she takes you on a ride to fuel your inspiration.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Mission to Inspire. My name is Shola, and we've got our wonderful guest here with us today. His name is Cory Rosenke. Hi, Cory. How are you?
I am great. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you so much for coming on our show. I'm so grateful to have you on. And as you know, we'll be talking about everything God related today, and especially your new book. So,
yes, thank you.
Cory Rosenke is an author, he's a pastor, he is a great communicator and a tenacious persuader of the truth. Wow. He is seen as the concept pioneer and the foremost authority on the cravings of the soul. So currently, he resides in California, and he spends his days reading, writing, exploring, shepherding. Well, he shepherds the soul, as we can see, and forever watching and wondering. By the way, what is it that you're wondering anyway? What is it that you're wondering about?
I'm wondering about people. I'm wondering about why everything is happening like it is. I'm wondering how we fit into the grand scheme of things and what all this means. And I've been that way since I was a little boy, to be honest. When I was raised very, very poor, and there was a season of life where we were homeless as a family. There was a season of life where we lived way up on the top of a mountain in a log cabin. And like by the top of the mountain, I mean the top of the mountain. Like we looked down on the clouds. And I remember I had a dog, and I would just wander the hills with my books, and I'd find a vantage point, and I would sit down and I would read, and I'd be swept away into a different world. I mean, that's the beautiful thing about reading, right?
Yeah.
And I was always just wondering why. Ever since I was very little, that's been my thing. I mean, like I said, at 11 and 12 years old, I was reading Plato and Aristotle, and and then moved into Freud and C.S. Lewis, and it's just been who I am for whatever reason. That's the way God made me. I'm always watching and I'm always wondering.
No wonder you're an author.
Seems like a natural step. Yes,
it is a natural step. So I'm sure you've been. Were you writing then from when you were in your teens?
I was writing poems. I was writing songs at that particular time. Mostly, I was just reading. It's actually very interesting to actually now look at my book and see the influences of my life of reading, right? I can see C.S. Lewis in my writing, right? I can see Tozer in my writing. I can even see Plutarch in the development of my stories, right? And it's just funny how all those influences kind of come together. And when I read my own book now, I'm like, wow, I can see all these people who have influenced me over the years.
Great. Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to add to the short intro I did about you?
No, I think that was good. That was good.
Thank you. So how can we contact you before we start, if anyone wants to contact you?
Sure. Well, the best way for anyone to contact me across the world is to visit my website, coryrosenke.com. And actually, there's a button there that says "Contact Us," and those messages come straight to me, and I receive them in my emails, and I'm always on top of that sort of thing. So absolutely, coryrosenke.com, and go to Contact Us, and you will find me really quickly.
Great. Thank you for letting us know how to contact you. So we're going to go straight to this or that. Can we know you better? I'm going to ask you some questions.
Yes.
And just straightforward answer, this or that. Yeah?
Sure.
Tea or coffee?
Oh man. Well, I'm a straightforward answer. I'm a Canadian, and so I'm going to say tea. Tea with 2 scoops of sugar.
Okay, that's great. We love tea here in England anyway. We have tea breaks every time.
Oh man, my wife specifically loves tea, but we don't. American tea is not that great. We have to go to Canada or England to get good tea.
Friction or non-friction? I know you write, you author books. So which one is it?
Oh man, for me it would be nonfiction, right? I wanna read the real thing, and that's ever since I was little. Actually, again, that curiosity. I specifically wanted to read, not just a book about Julius Caesar. I wanted to read what Julius Caesar wrote.
Right.
That's the kind of thing. So yeah.
You're all about the real thing then.
Exactly, all about the real thing.
Yeah. Mountain or beaches?
Oh, mountain. That's in my blood growing up. I'm a mountain boy, and I love my British Columbia mountains or mountains, anywhere for that matter.
Okay, great. Early bed or night owl?
Oh, I'm an early riser. Yeah.
Okay.
I like to get up early. To me, I always say my most efficient best moments are between 4 a.m. and 11 a.m. So that's my sweet spot.
Ah, that's good. So do you go to bed early then?
Yes, I like to be in bed, but for sure by 9.
Okay.
If it's 10 o'clock, then I'm really being rebellious and risky.
We don't want to see that side of you then.
That's right.
Are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I am both. I am an introvert in general everyday life, and yet as a pastor, I can't just be an introvert. And
That's
so
true.
I've learned to be an extrovert at certain times, and but I would definitely say that I'm a weird mixture of both.
Of both. Okay. Right. And then cats or dog? I don't know if you have pets.
Well, we have a cat, and my wife would say that I love my cat, but I would say I'm a dog person. I grew up with dogs. I love when you look at a dog, you know that it loves you. Not so much with a cat. Sometimes.
Okay. So is it your wife that made you love the cat then?
Probably.
We know how to get you guys. That's just
Yeah.
it. You just have to love what we love.
Our cat and I have a weird relationship where, she's definitely, I enjoy her.
Oh, that's great. Pen and paper or digital notes?
Oh, I hate to say it. I actually feel, for whatever reason, I'm a digital note guy. I do not like writing on pen and paper, and yet I wish I did. There's something cooler about a pen and paper in my mind, from my perspective. But yeah, I'm unfortunately I'm a digital guy.
Sweet or savvy?
Savory.
Okay. City life or country living?
I want to live on a mountain beside a city. So country.
But you're in the city right now.
Yeah. It was very weird of us to move from, all the wilds of Canada to all of a sudden be in the Silicon Valley, California. Big life change. But I got to say, I really like both. Everyday life, I want to live in the country. I want that freedom. But I really like city lights and,
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with a mixture of both. So
yeah, exactly.
Reading or writing?
Oh, that's a tough one. Reading inspires me to write, I guess. So I would say, I guess I'm going to choose writing. I have to. I'm a writer.
Yeah, you're a writer, exactly. That's what I wanted to say. You're a writer. You just have to choose writing. Okay. So today we'll be discussing the magnetic heart of God, which actually is the title of your latest book as well. So what is the concept of this book, Magnetic Heart of God, and why did you write it?
Well, that's a good question. I'm gonna start with your last question in there, and that is, I really wrote the book to help people develop a deeper sense of self-awareness and social understanding. I mean, the concept of the book is really to explore and answer our united but often unspoken question of why. And specifically, I'm always looking towards the deep why, the why that's lurking below the surface, right? The root cause, which I propose to be discovered within our souls more than it is within our bodies and our minds, which is very different than what we hear in the world today. And so we're all asking these questions of why. I mean, wondering why did my neighbor run off on their spouse, right? Why really? I mean, there's all sorts of surface reasons, but what's really lying beneath, right? Well, I've heard this one a lot. Why won't my sister talk to me anymore? Or my brother talk to me? Or why don't I want to talk to them? Why really? why does the world seem obsessed with money and sex? Why is everybody staring at their smartphones? And here's the big one. I often think about, why is it that we live in an age of unprecedented prosperity? I mean, when you think of it, our generation has access to more education, to more opportunity, to more leisure, to more comfort, to more freedom, to more entertainment than any other generation in the history of the world.
It's true.
And yet virtually every study shows that we are more unhappy than ever. And not only unhappy, but we are confused. Why? Right? And so I propose that when we really understand the deep why, it changes everything. In fact, my publisher put on the back of the book, at the very back of the book, they wrote, "Caution, this book removes masks and names names." It gets to the nitty gritty where we're really asking the question of why, that deep, deep question. And my hope is that after people read The Magnetic Heart of God, that they'll better be able to look around the world and understand why. And that understanding will then result in compassion or maybe patience, where they didn't have it before they finally understood. And even, perhaps even more important, I really hope people will finally be able to look within themselves and understand their own needs at a level that perhaps they never considered before.
That's true. That's very true. That's very true. Wow. Wow. So to me, actually, I read a bit of the book because I downloaded it, I think last night, and I read a bit of it. And he really moved me, touched my heart, because he is referring to the captivating and the captivating love and compassion of God to us human. And only if we can just, observe that for a moment and see how he loves us, the compassion he has towards us. I was like, wow, I need to read this book to the end.
Yeah, and how he designed us for connection with him, right? And in that connection is where we find, the power to walk through life, that we find that purpose, we find that meaning, we find peace, frankly, right? And that's how we are designed, I believe, to live in connection with the maker of the universe. And that is a titanic thought when you really think about it.
Exactly. Thank you so much. So for those of us that want to purchase the book, e-copy, hard copy, how do we purchase it?
Well, really, the book should be available worldwide, wherever books are sold. And so you should be able to find it. It's interesting because, the world has really moved to online sales. I read an article a while ago that said something like 85% of books are purchased online.
Yeah.
And they anticipate within another 18 months that it'll be over 90% of books are purchased online. So especially if you're purchasing online, if you just type in The Magnetic Heart of God, Understanding the Five Cravings of Your Soul, it should be available at a place near you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And that will be in the show notes and the description anyway, how to purchase the book if anyone wants to buy. I'm sure this book will bless our souls. So yeah, let's buy this book and read.
Thank you.
Thank you. So how does the magnetic house of God relate to spirituality?
Well, in The Magnetic Heart of God, I identify what I call the five cravings of the soul. Okay. And when I talk about the soul, what I'm referencing is I'm referencing that non-biological part of each one of us, that part of us that is beyond biology. And so I identify these five cravings that are the primary motivator, I propose, of all our human ambition. These cravings aren't just physical cravings, they're not psychological cravings, they are deeper. They go beyond biology. They are way down deep. And spiritually speaking, the reason I called the book The Magnetic Heart of God is because I propose that God placed these cravings within us for the ultimate and good purpose of drawing us toward a connection with him. As I mentioned, in whom we finally experience and discover and realize life in true abundance and peace. And God placed these cravings within us to draw us to himself, because there is no other place that these cravings can be satisfied. In fact, I would propose that the reason we see the world and the chaos it is today in so many areas, or the reason we have so much and yet we're so unhappy, is because we've been looking for peace in all the wrong places. We've been trying to satisfy these deep cravings in careers, right? In bank accounts and all these other places, and we can't find them there. And God specifically designed them to be satisfied within him. And I suppose that's the spiritual component. It's all about that. It's realizing that we are not just bodies and minds. We are body, mind, and soul. And that's it's not just the body that has cravings. It's not just the mind that has cravings. It's the soul that has cravings. And God put those cravings within us for the beautiful purpose of drawing us to him, in whom we can find true satisfaction.
That's true. That's true. That reminds me of the word of God in the Bible that says that he feeds the birds.
Yeah. Yeah.
So if he feeds the birds, then us.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you think of passages, where it says, in him we live and move and have our being. In him. That's a big statement. In Jesus, when he said, man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that proceeds from the mouth of God.
Yeah.
And in connection with our Maker is where we find that true life, where we find that missing piece. And and so I really hope that the Magnetic Heart of God is really a book, what I hope, a self-discovery where people will be awakened to themselves in a way that they never have before.
Wow. Thank you for that. So then how or in what ways can we connect with our God in our daily lives? How can we connect with him?
Yeah. Well, I would say the first step might be for many people. So I talk to a lot of people on air or in person, and oftentimes the first step I have to take is to convince people that they actually have souls, right? And I would argue that we are our own best evidence that we have souls. I often will tell that to people. You are your own best evidence that you have a soul. Why? Because your soul has cravings that are not biological. Your soul that has cravings that go beyond like I said, the physical and the psychological. And so oftentimes I'm trying to convince people first off that you have a soul, and then to realize that soul is what it truly means to be made in the image of God. When we talk about being made in the image of God, it doesn't mean that God has 10 fingers. It doesn't mean that God runs around on 2 legs, right? It means that we are lovingly and custom designed to live in connection with the master of the universe. And when we live in connection with him, we have that power to discover identity and purpose and meaning. And as I talk about lots in the book, to discover peace.
Right. Wow. That is huge. That is huge. Thank you. So can you give us examples of how the magnetic heart of God has transformed lives of people?
Oh man, it's always interesting to see how, I felt like I wrote a book and you never know where it's going to go, and you never know how it's going to impact people. So it has been a fascinating journey, just listening to people's testimonies. I've had people come to me and talk about, how they've seen themselves and the world around them in a way that they never have before. And then I had one person tell me one time, it changed the way I finally understood my boss. I finally understood why my workplace is the way it is, why people act the way they do. And they said, once I understood this, I was able to adapt. I was able to have compassion where I couldn't have compassion before. I was able, to have patience where I wasn't patient before. And it changed everything for them. I've had people tell me that it changed the way they viewed their spouse and the way they approached their marriage. I actually had someone tell me it changed the way they viewed their kids. And it changed the way they parented, because they realized they looked at their kids and they realized, hey, my kids aren't just, these little biological monsters, that sometimes are, they have souls created in the image of God, and those souls are crying out for something. And when they saw their child and they saw them as more than just this little biological creature, but as a soul created in the image of God, it changed the way they viewed them. And then of course I've heard a lot of people say that it changed the way they viewed their perspective on God and their relationship with him.
Wow.
And so that's all exciting to hear. It's definitely done that same thing for me. I would say for my own testimony, it has changed the way that I view my own kids, and it's given me a compassion and a patience, and even to a certain degree as a parent, a strategy that I didn't have before. And it's very exciting.
Wow. Thank you for giving us those examples. If I may ask a question, when I read a few chapters of that book, it did talk about the Garden of Eden.
Yeah. Well, the Garden of Eden is where it all began, right? This is when we talk about the world kind of having fallen apart. That's where it began. That's where it began, right? And so I talk in the book about how, you know, God created Adam and Eve, mankind in his own image. And the Garden of Eden is that place that we all view in our minds as perfection, right? It's paradise, right? And by paradise, when I talk about the five cravings of the soul, you know, I'm talking about, and of course, the book goes in depth about these. It talks about our need for security. By security, I'm talking about physical security and relational security, our craving for identity. Who am I? Why am I? What is my purpose? Do I have value? Our craving for independence. You know, we talk about that a lot, but freedom, you know, we want autonomy, but it's not just freedom. It's about the desire to be an individuality, you know, have individuality. You're you and I'm me, and we want each other to know that. We want to know that we're individuals. The desire for significance. We need to know that we're not only unique, but that we're also special. That's a deep craving within us. And then the final one is the craving for innocence. We all want to know that we are good people. And we're not bad people. And in fact, that craving for innocence stands second to none. When we think of almost every fight we've ever had in our lives, it all began because we felt that somebody was subtly or not so subtly accusing us of wrongdoing. And that desire for innocence kind of came up, and we pushed back hard because they were treading on that desire for innocence. And so we have these five cravings, and you look at the Garden of Eden, and they had all of them met perfectly. They were secure. They knew who they were. They had independence. God said, "Go create, go steward, you know, go name the animals." Right? They had significance. They're the crown jewel of creation. And they were innocent. Sin hadn't entered the world. And then what happens? Then the serpent comes into the picture. And what is this? And what does the serpent do? The serpent says, as he always does, even today, the serpent isn't, you know, he hasn't changed his tune one little bit. He says the same thing. Did God really say? You know, he asked them, did God really say this? Can you really trust him? Right? He disrupts their sense of security with God. He disrupts their identity with God, and then he offers them a counterfeit independence and significance. He says, you will be like God if you just disobey him, right? And then everything falls apart and they lose their innocence. It all comes crashing down in the Garden of Eden.
Crashing down right now.
and we've been scouring the globe, wandering around ever since, desperately trying to find hope and meaning and peace.
That's so true. Wow. We can't reverse that. We can't reverse that now. That's done. So here we are.
But we can know that it happened, and that is the real point of the book, is to help people say, you know, identify the root of the problem, right? It's all about answering the why. Why are people like this? Why am I like this? And when you understand why, it like I said, it gives you more patience, it gives you more grace, but it also shows you where to start looking. Right? It helps you say, oh, you know, if I this is what I'm looking for, I'm not finding it here, I'm not finding it here, but I can find it here.
That's very true. So how can we cultivate a deeper understanding and experience of the magnetic heart of God? So in the perspective of us having a deeper relationship with God.
Well, I would say the first step is awakening to the reality of your soul. And then realizing that your soul is not mute or passive. See, the challenge about being someone who talks about the soul a lot is I'm entering into a realm where the soul has become ambiguous. We reference it all the time, kind of in these passing ways, but it's always ambiguous. It has no definition. It has no meaning. We don't really know what we're saying. We're just acknowledging something that isn't biological. And so the first step is to acknowledge that your soul is real, that it's not mute or passive. That's another lie or or a misconception that is around the world today, that somehow we have souls, but they don't activate until we die. And then we die and somehow the soul is activated. I'm saying that you are a soul, that the soul is the core of who you are, that your soul is loud, that it is your soul that is reaching out for purpose and identity and meaning. And when we realize it's the soul and it's not just the body, and it's not just, like I said, a psychological issue, it is deeper than that. That's, I think, where it starts from. And it transforms our whole life when we realize that. And second, I believe that we are currently experiencing the magnetic heart of God. Like I said, God placed those cravings within us in order to guide us and draw us toward a connection with him. And the question for each of us is, will we fight that connection like Adam and Eve did? Or will we move towards that connection? And the decision we make every day when we wake up, am I going to move toward that connection with God, or am I going to move away from it and try to find it in other places? That changes our lives radically. And every morning we wake up, we have the decision which choice we're going to make.
That's true. And that's a very big decision that we have to make on a daily basis. And that actually shapes us to who we are and defines our purpose and destiny.
Yes, absolutely. Yep.
Thank you so much. So any inspirational advice for our viewers today?
Well, I guess I would say this, and I find this inspirational, so I hope your viewers will find this inspirational, is to remember that you are a three-part being, and God made you this way. You are body, mind, and soul. And one of the primary reasons we see the chaos in the world today, the depression in the world today, the confusion in the world today, the frustration in the world today, it's because we've been catering almost obsessively in modern culture to the cravings of the body and the mind. But our souls have been starving to death. Our souls have been starving to death. And I believe that that is what's been shaking society today, is these starving souls. And so I would remind your listeners that more than a brain or a body, you are an eternal soul. Yeah. And your soul is the attribute that best defines you. It's not the reflection looking back at you in the mirror. It's not the number on the weight scale. It's not the diploma on your wall, right? It's not the balance in your bank account. It's not the color of your skin or the ring on your finger or the lack of a ring on your finger. It's not any of these things. You are an eternal soul, lovingly created in the image of God and designed to live in connection with the creator of the universe. That is the core of who we are. And identifying this truth about yourself will change everything.
That's true. It actually reminds me about the Trinity. Yeah. It reminds me about the Trinity.
Yeah. I've called it at times the small T Trinity, kind of within each of us, right? The body, mind, and the soul. Yeah. And when we awaken to the realization that, like I said, our soul is not a mute passenger, but in fact, I would argue it's the boss. The soul sends directives to the mind, and the mind sends directives to the body. And which is why when you go through the scripture, it talks about how the souls of mankind have gone off course. It says Jesus came to save souls. It says that God is a shepherd over our souls, right? Because your soul is the core of who you are. And it's a radical change of perspective from what the world is trying to convince us of today. And I would just really encourage people to look into this reality of themselves.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you for coming on our show. Let's remember to buy the book, The Magnetic Heart of God. I'm sure it's going to bless us. We've read just a little snippet from that book. So I'm sure if we read it in depth, it's going to bless us and maybe change one or two things about the way we view life in general. Yes. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you. And until next time, it's Shola and Cory. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you for joining us today on Mission to Inspire. Subscribe if you have not already done so. Like, comment, leave a message. Let's stay connected. Let's jointly inspire the world.